Hi, everyone. Let's get started in a minute. Feel free to start asking questions. All right, let's get started. So feel free to start asking questions in the comments. Just a couple of things I've been noticing about profile building in these last few days to a week. There seems to be a lot of interest in trying to meet the membership and awards criteria. Those criteria shouldn't really be the ones you want to be targeting if you don't already meet judging or authorship. Those tend to be the more straightforward criteria to target. Membership and awards are nice to haves, but aren't really necessary for a strong profile. If you have strong evidence for both, that can be helpful. But if you don't have any sort of evidence for the membership criterion or awards criterion, you don't want to focus on those criteria instead of judging an authorship. That being said, you should still work towards membership. If at all possible, try to get involved in professional organizations and try to go for those more difficult to get leadership positions within these organizations, which can help with membership. It's not always just fellowships that help with the membership criterion. Other kinds of memberships can help as well, just not general memberships that are accessible to pretty much everyone in your field. You want to show that there was some sort of selection process for you to get that membership. But yeah, generally speaking, just try not to focus all your efforts on trying to meet membership and awards. I see a lot of you going for fellowships, spending weeks and even months on a fellowship application instead of using that time on reaching out to people in your field to get involved in professional organizations, working on papers as part of the authorship criterion. That being said, working on papers can still take a lot of time. It's just that the authorship criterion is more straightforward. And if you can show, say, 2 to 3 journal articles and perhaps a couple of trade publication articles and professional publication articles, you have a much stronger claim for authorship, whereas you can have some prestigious memberships and still get questioned on the membership criterion. So that's something about membership and awards that comes up a lot. Instead of that, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. Anyone have questions? A lot of people seem to also ask the question of how long does profile building take? Based on a lot of the industry profiles I have seen in the last few weeks, this seems to be a general rule you can apply. If you are an industry professional with a strong critical role claim and a strong high salary claim, profile building is possible in 6 months to a year, depending on the strength of your anchor criterion, usually your critical role, as in how strong is the foundation of your argument that you've risen to the top of your field. If you have a strong argument for how you've risen to the top of your field based on the critical role you currently hold or the series of critical roles you have held in your career, then 6 months to a year is possible if you focus on profile building towards judging and authorship and spend probably a lot more time than what people are spending on profile building right now. Probably at least a couple of hours per week of focused profile building to build towards authorship and judging. If you don't have those two criteria, or if you don't have a strong, say, critical role claim or original contributions, or you don't have a foundation to your overall profile, and it is not clear that you have risen to the top of your field, then profile building is probably going to take 3 years, 4 years, even more, even longer. So Nicolina has a question, where to start with media category and profile building. So if you really want to go for media coverage, which is also one of those difficult criteria, start off with reaching out to journalists in your field. So you can just email a lot of these journalists. A lot of them are looking for pitches. A lot of publications also have pages that describe the pitching process. You can directly pitch to these publications to see if you can get featured in them. But just to give you a sense of how difficult this process is, I've heard people reach out to hundreds of reporters only to get a couple of replies and then get one media mention. And it's usually not the most prestigious media outlets that are featuring them. So I would question whether media is something that is really going to be that important for your case. If you have a lot of media coverage already, and this is just something you've been doing, which is definitely possible. I have seen people, in fact, someone I recently spoke to got approved for EB-1A. When he started profile building, he already had 30 to 50 media mentions. So he was already actively involved in talking to the media. Maybe if you're in that position, you should go for the media coverage criterion. But as to how and where to start, it's just going to come down to a lot of outreach, perhaps going to conferences to meet reporters. It's just going to take a lot of outreach, unless you already know a lot of reporters and have already been featured in media. Hi, Henry. Greetings. Kathy asks, can you help with media category for chemical engineering PhD professional? So it's still, based on my previous comments about media, especially if you're going for an academia-focused profile, media isn't going to be as important as you think it will be. Authorship is probably going to be where you will want to focus, in addition to original contributions. I mean, I do share some insights on how to reach out to reporters within my newsletter, but it's not really a criterion you should be targeting, especially if you're an academic. It sounds like you're going the academia path, or maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong there. But even if you're an industry professional, you don't want to start off with a media criterion. It's not a criterion that, if you have strong evidence for, you will be able to show how you've risen to the top of your field, short of getting featured in the most prestigious media outlets. So Kylie asks, scholarly articles, original contributions, and judging is what I have. I satisfy 3 criteria, but I do not have any other criteria. Which ones do you think are easy to target? I am a chemical engineering PhD applying for academia-focused profile. Probably, I mean, if you have strong original contributions, that is, you can show that the original contributions you have made to your field have gotten significant attention and or have been used in some sort of commercial context, perhaps by other top US companies or top US institutions within your field. I just actually covered this in a recent post about an AAO decision. So the AAO is the Administrative Appeals Office that reviews appeals for EB-1A, EB-2NW, and O1 initial denials, amongst other decisions. So if you look at that AAO decision post, you'll see a very strong original contributions claim, because that person was able to show that their contributions were not only used by other top US institutions within their field, but also institutions outside of the US as well. So if you're able to show that original contributions, then you can most likely also argue critical role or leading role within, say, your research institution, because of the influence your work has been having on the field and the wider significance of your work, such that you are also playing some sort of critical role in contributing to some significant outcomes for your research institution, that is if you're a researcher. So yeah, critical role is something you want to look into. Perhaps high salary, it really depends on if you're going for an academia focused profile. High salary may not be something that you can readily meet. Something else to look into though. And finally, I think those are the two you want to be looking at. Maybe membership, but again, membership is difficult to meet. Also, you don't have to be going for like 6 to 7 criteria. That's not really what makes a strong profile. What makes a strong profile is strong final merits after you meet 3 to 4 criteria, not 6 to 7 criteria without really any regard for final merits. Anyone else have questions? So I can briefly go through my newsletter resources. So as some of you already know, I currently run a paid newsletter for $12 per month, which gives you access to a bunch of my newsletter resources, one of which is my profile building opportunities database, which gives you access to a database that lists over 300 profile building opportunities for different fields. So I have quite a few for tech, I have quite a few for AI, data science, and there are a bunch of other fields that I've started covering as well. And these are just to give you a sense of how to start profile building and what kinds of opportunities to look for and how an opportunity can fit into a certain criterion or even help with final merits. So this is my profile building opportunities database, which you get access to as a paid subscriber to my newsletter. Another resource I've been sharing have been AO decision reviews. So I just mentioned what an AO decision is. So these go into USCIS's reasoning for initially denying an EB-1A or EB-2NIW or O1 petition. These decisions I review for profile building insights, and I go through the reasoning, and based on what I've heard, at least from EB-1A recipients, AO decisions can be really useful in understanding how USCIS thinks about EB-1A, about O1, about EB-2NIW. So definitely decisions you want to be reviewing, and I review these decisions occasionally. I'll be reviewing another one this week, most likely. And just going back to share my screen. But yeah, going back to AO decisions, I'll be reviewing another one this week to give you a sense of what strong final merits look like. So yeah. So this is an AO decision, and I review a bunch of these, and you'll get access to a bunch of my reviews in my newsletter resources. I also have video resources. These are recorded conversations with EB-1A recipients, and I ask questions that a lot of you ask me. And I've also started to upload some of my office hour recordings to my video resources. And something else that I run as part of my newsletter is it's a private group where people have been able to land judging opportunities, have been able to find co-authors for papers they're working on, have been able to find conference speaking opportunities. So this is a private group. It's a private group and also a group chat as well within my newsletter. And from what I've seen, people are actively working together to find opportunities together. So they're finding people in their field to work with. A lot of these people are also in leadership positions within organizations in their field, so they're actively sharing opportunities. And it's something that you want to be doing generally as well when you're profile building, sharing opportunities, because that can be a way for you to meet more top professionals in your field and work with them on opportunities together. So that's also a big component to my newsletter. And in addition to that, you also get additional newsletter posts from me through my newsletter that specifically go into some of the questions that you've been asking and also provide insights into how to speed up your profile building and also focus your profile building. But based on all the resources I presented, I think the private group is really where a lot of you will find a lot of ways to make more progress on profile building. You'll meet all kinds of professionals in the private group. And yeah, all of that is part of my newsletter, which you get access to for $12 per month. But going back to questions, what is a number of reviews one would need to do in order to have a strong judging criteria for academic profile peer reviewing? So for academia, I would say if you are going to show that you have risen to the top of your field and your field is a research field, I would say as many prestigious judging opportunities as possible and don't really go for a specific number, because you are trying to show that you've risen to the top of your field in research, showing that you have been invited to, say, top conferences or been invited by the editors of top journals to review their submissions. As much of that evidence as possible would be incredibly helpful for your research profile. It's just if you're not a research professional, that's when peer reviewing doesn't become as important. I mean, having some peer review opportunities can help with the judging criterion and is usually the strongest form of judging evidence, even for industry professionals. It's just judging isn't really going to be foundational to an industry case, whereas judging could be foundational to a research case, which is where you want to not really focus on the number of opportunities to go for, but more so the types of journals you're reviewing for, the types of conferences you've been invited to review for. That's when you, or the types of publications you have been invited to review for. It's not really about a number of judging criteria. I would say as many as possible that are high quality. And it also depends on whether judging is going to be one of those anchors to your research profile. For some people it is. For others, it's more original contributions, but then having strong original contributions in research will most likely lead to more judging opportunities anyways, because if you've influenced the field, you are most likely going to be asked to contribute your expertise in some way to reviewing journals, to reviewing conference submissions. So you will just organically get these opportunities anyways if you have a strong foundation to your case already, usually original contributions. Anyone else have questions? Any other questions? But yeah, I don't really get that many questions about final merits. I feel like it's a forgotten part of profile building. People seem to think that all you need to do is check off a bunch of activities to meet 3, 4, or even more criteria, thinking that the more criteria you meet at like some sort of minimum level, the stronger your profile. But in reality, you need to be showing how you've risen to the top of your field, and that's where final merits comes into play. If you can't show evidence of sustained acclaim and that your achievements indicate that you've risen to the top of your field, it's going to be quite difficult to present a strong profile. So Jonas asks, K-12 teacher and H-1B, PhD in educational technology, 4 published articles on AI in education, 0 citations, 10 conference speaking opportunities in America and Mexico, 3 invitations for conferences this year, 3 presentations covered in media reviewer, 1 PhD student thesis has been invited to be a reviewer in Mexico and US, leadership role in 2 important programs in Mexico in the past, and 2 here in the US, membership in 3 organizations involved in ed tech. So is the question, do you have a strong profile? I would say it really depends on, you would have to give me more context around the leadership roles that you hold and the importance of these programs in Mexico and the ones that, and I guess you have roles in the US as well. Based on what you've told me so far, and I don't know about the quality of the articles that you have published, assuming they are high quality, that is a good set of articles for the authorship claim. 3 conference invitations, 3 presentations. Presentations can also count towards authorship. Invitations for conferences can be useful as well in showing that you have been influencing the field, being recognized in the field that you are in. So again, conference invitations can help with strong final merits. I would need more context around the leadership roles you hold, but if you can meet critical role on the basis of these leadership roles, then I would say you have a strong start to a profile. It's really hard to say what your chances are because, and I don't really think in those terms. I mean, like a 20% for one lawyer could be like a different 20% for another lawyer because they all have different experiences in regards to these cases. I would say you have if you have critical role, then you have a strong start. But you would probably need more judging, which should not be difficult for you to get if you have a critical role and you are involved in all these conferences. But I would say more judging at this point. How can an industry professional with master's without PhD and research experience approach EB-1A? So you don't need a PhD to get EB-1A. You don't even need research experience. Some people don't even go for authorship when they're applying for EB-1A. As an industry professional, it is possible to present a strong profile with just 3 criteria: critical role, high salary, and judging. That being said, just working on 3 criteria is not that great of an approach because what could happen is one criterion could get struck down and then your entire case falls apart even with strong final merits. So that's why people try to go for authorship. Some people try to go for membership instead of authorship, which is not as great as going for authorship, but it is possible to build a strong profile. And there are a lot of people in my private group, I believe, who are not even going for authorship, don't have research experience, and are still building strong profiles. So this is my private group within my newsletter. You can also not have research experience and still work towards authorship. You just have to be comfortable with writing, say, professional publication articles or trade publication articles. Those types of publications are not as strong as, say, writing for a journal, but they can still help you meet the authorship criterion potentially and be that 4th criterion. So it is possible to build a strong industry profile without a PhD. PhD is not a requirement for, it's not really a requirement for industry cases. It's more so a requirement for academia cases. So, and if you don't have research experience, try to work with people who have papers. Try to work with people who have publication experience. A lot of these people are in my private group, by the way, within my newsletter. A lot of them are working in papers, and a bunch of them don't have research experience. A bunch of them do, so they're all working together to work on papers in their fields. So I asked if I have a 135K salary job and that is more than 90th percentile in my area, then is it enough for high salary criteria? Assuming that is base, assuming you have checked, then that is a strong argument for the high salary criterion. Mike asks, how do we start with media category when profile building? So you don't need to start with the media category when profile building. Media coverage is not usually where people start. People usually start with critical role. And if they can confirm they have critical role, then, and sometimes that leads to high salary as well, that's when they look at judging and authorship. But if you really wanted to start with media, then start getting involved in professional organizations and start reaching out to journalists, getting into conversations with them, pitching some of the publications in your field to see if you can get covered by them. It would just be a lot of outreach unless you already have an existing network of journalists. But then again, that would still be outreach. And you would try to go for high quality media spots, not just media spots that anyone can get, given just how difficult it is to meet media in general anyway. So you don't want to be just throwing low quality or just decent evidence at USCIS for this particular criterion. So it's the same question. Lavanya asks, does just becoming members of organizations like IEEE Senior, BCS Fellow, IET Fellow suffice for membership criteria? Generally, no. There's no minimum threshold you have to meet for membership. I mean, if you just present general memberships like IEEE general member, then you're probably not going to meet membership. But that's why membership is so difficult to meet. You can have BCS, you can have IET, and still not get the membership criteria. So given that it takes weeks and even months to work on these kinds of fellowship applications, you probably want to think about whether you want to spend all your time on these fellowship applications, all your time and effort, all your resources, or instead focus on judging and authorship first, and then work towards more organic membership opportunities like regional leadership positions within IEEE or committee positions within the organizations that you've gotten involved in, or conference organizing committee positions. Maybe focusing on those kinds of memberships instead of just spending months on these fellowships. It's something I've been seeing a lot. A lot of people are just trying to go for these fellowships, but the problem with that approach is that they just take a lot of time. You can still get denied, as in you can still not get those fellowships, and even if you do get those fellowships, you can still get denied on the membership criteria. Sai asks, just letter from manager describing my role is critical in current project is enough for critical role criteria. You're going to have to provide context around the criticality of your role, and your manager is going to have to do the same for the reference letter. You can't just say your role is critical and then just leave it at that. You have to show, for example, how your work has contributed to significant outcomes for your company. So for some people, that's hundreds of millions in revenue. So you have to show that your work can be attributable to that outcome. Without that attribution, it's going to be hard to argue that your role is critical at the company. Just saying your role is critical is not providing the context that an officer will need to evaluate whether your role is actually critical. So you're going to say, I was invited by Webster University to help reshape 2 of the programs in education and innovation. I also was a member of the design committee for their MA in education and AI. In Mexico, I was the lead trainer in the state. I lived in a program where I trained 2,000 in service elementary school teachers and 150 school principals that would impact more than 100,000 students in a federal program. So those are really good impact metrics. And if you can show enough proof around those metrics, then you can then show, I think this would definitely be the start of a strong critical role claim, especially if you can show that your work you played some sort of leading role. It's not just critical role. This could be a leading role as well. Since it seems like you were one of the leaders within this program, if you can argue that, then within this federal program, then you can argue that you have or had a leading role. You don't need to show that you're currently in a leading role. You can show that you've held leading roles in the past. So that combined with what you have for authorship, I would say is a strong start for a profile, but you would still probably need more judging and then maybe more prestigious conference speaking opportunities. I mean, you already have a couple that you mentioned, just speaking opportunities in general. So go for more of those as a way to strengthen the final merits of your profile. Anyone else have questions? Any other? Something else I want to bring up as a final thing is that you can meet criteria on a plain language level, which means doing activities that. So Sai has a question. Do you suggest any good profile building mentoring companies for EB-1A? No, I don't suggest any of these I don't really suggest any mentoring companies. Yeah, I haven't really been on the inside of any of these companies, so I can't really say. But yeah, in terms of profile building services, I can only comment on my own. So right now I run a paid newsletter for $12 a month, which gives you access to a bunch of my resources that I just showed. That includes a profile building opportunities database, which lists over 300 profile building opportunities. It also includes a private group where you can meet all the top professionals in your field. And a lot of these people in the group have been working together on papers, have been sharing conference speaking opportunities, have been sharing judging opportunities they have come across through the organizations they're involved with. So I can only comment on what I'm doing. And then outside of that, I also do one-to-one profile building calls. So if you want to reach out about those, you can reach out. Just feel free to send me a message and we can talk about whether a call would be a good fit for you. But that's just the extent of my services. Yeah, and I'm also working on a live course right now with an immigration lawyer who has a record of having worked on over 100 EB-1A cases with an approval rate of 96%, over 96%. So if you're interested in that live course, feel free to message me as well, and I can share more information about that. So Lavanya asks, looks like such memberships have become pretty easy to obtain given the community support. Do we also need to show that we have contributed to the organizations, or just having membership fellowship is enough? It depends on the fellowship. If the fellowship is, if it's a difficult fellowship to get, is considered highly prestigious in your field, and just getting the fellowship alone is considered a notable achievement, then that in itself can really help with membership. Of course, once you get that position, you probably want to get more involved in the organization because you already have this level of recognition. So why not use it to get more profile building opportunities? If it's just like a membership or fellowship that you just get and then nothing else happens after that, then I would question the usefulness of that membership or fellowship. That could be the case for some highly prestigious fellowships, but I think they're less the case than, say, prestigious fellowships where you do get more like invitation only opportunities because of the level of distinction you have shown in your field. But going back to your question, I probably would not target memberships or questions that are easy to get. You don't need to show you've contributed to the organizations, but it would definitely help a lot. So a lot I was thinking about following now, EB-1A. Sure, if you need any lawyer recommendations, feel free to message me. Marshall asks, are 3 research papers in conference, 5 technical articles, and media platforms enough to meet authorship criteria for industry professional? Assuming that there are decent to high quality research papers and not just like kind of papers you just pay to get published, then yes, I would say that is pretty decent evidence for the authorship criterion, especially since you're an industry professional. Nachika asks, do talking opportunities like internal Amazon developer conference, all Amazon developer size count for media coverage? Does media coverage of products I built work if they generate lots of revenue? This sounds like more useful evidence. I mean, assuming you work at Amazon, that is, this sounds like more useful evidence for a critical role. Getting internal press coverage as an internal coverage within your company is always good to show for a critical role. It also helps solidify your claims that you have made significant contributions to your company. As for whether it meets the media coverage criterion, probably not. Company media about you does not really help with media coverage, but all of this can help with critical role, which is still, it's still like a decent boost to your profile. It's not like you have to somehow find evidence for critical role and somehow find evidence for media coverage. Just boosting critical role enough with this evidence can be really helpful already. Anyone else have questions? Yeah, for those of you who are just joining, I was initially talking about how media coverage and awards are not necessary criteria for EB-1A. It's not like you need these criteria in order to present a strong EB-1A profile. You don't need membership, you don't need awards, you don't need media. You can present a strong profile with critical role, high salary, judging, and authorship, or even critical role, high salary, and judging. Once you get to the point of 3 to 4 criteria, you want to be focusing on final merits, not on getting as many criteria as possible. This is something I also share a lot. I say a lot of this in my private group too. I tell people, because I get this question all the time, I tell people to stop trying to max out on the number of criteria they are targeting. And if you're starting off, you should definitely not take that approach, because what's probably going to happen is you're just going to spread yourself too thin. You're going to target too many activities. You are also going to target criteria that are difficult to get, like membership, like media, and you will think that you're not making progress because you're not hearing back from journalists, because you're not hearing back from these like fellowship bodies, but in reality, you don't need these opportunities. What you need is to start getting involved in local chapters of professional organizations. What you need to do is start applying for conferences to speak at, or just attend conferences or events to start meeting top professionals. What you don't want to be doing is just applying for things and just kind of like waiting around for these opportunities to come about. Because what if you don't get that media coverage that you really wanted? What if you don't get those fellowships? Then you will have made like no progress, literally no progress. So focus on those more attainable opportunities, like judging, like authorship. Because authorship, you can just start working with people in your field. That's what like members of my private group are doing. They can just work with people in their field. They can just like start working on papers together and then just start applying to conferences with these papers, or applying to publication to get published in these like trade publications or professional publications. That's something that's far more straightforward than pitching a journalist. And I've done a lot of this pitching, and it takes a lot of time. Is there a number of citation count you should target? And for judging, do global but company internal hackathons count? There is no citation count you need to target for if you're an industry professional. Citations don't really matter for industry professionals. For judging, internal hackathons don't really count, but if you can get experience judging internal hackathons and then use that as a way to branch off into other hackathons that do involve other industry professionals, then those hackathons could be useful opportunities. And something else I forgot to mention as part of my newsletter resources is I maintain a contacts database. So these are people that I've reached out to who are interested in speaking to you about the opportunities that their organizations are offering. So I got in touch with a university a couple of months ago, and they were able to invite a bunch of people as part of my newsletter to an actual opportunity where these people got to judge the work of research faculty. So that's just another example of a resource I provide as part of my newsletter. You get access to a database of conference organizers, universities, people that I've spoken to who are open to having you reach out to them because they're interested in hearing from you. Right. Anyone else have questions? Right. If there are no other questions, yeah, just one final note is try to work with other people on profile building. And you can even divide up the work. You can have one person, say, focus on judging, another person focus on authorship. That's just a better way to divide up the work and to speed up progress. All right, last question. And who asks, judging if someone invite me for review technical papers, does that count towards judging criteria, or are 2 of them sufficient? So it depends on who that someone is. But if that's like, say, the editor of a journal or some sort of conference organizer for like a research conference, for instance, and they've invited you to peer review their papers, that could be strong judging evidence. And two peer reviewing opportunities is decent for judging, but maybe upping that to 3 to 4 could be even better for judging. So that's just the sort of thing that it's not really about a specific count. If you've reviewed for 2 of the most prestigious journals in your field, then that could be really strong judging evidence already. But if they're not really prestigious journals, then try to go for 2 to 3 to perhaps even 5, depending on what else you're working on for your profile. All right. That's all for today's live stream. Thanks everyone for joining.